Hello, children. Welcome to online classes. Today we will discuss two chapters, states of matter, followed by thermodynamics and thermochemistry. Boyle's law, it states that given volume, that is volume of given mass of a gas, is inversely proportional to its pressure when temperature is kept constant. Volume of a given mass of a gas inversely proportional to its pressure. That is, volume is proportional to 1 by P, or we can say PV is equal to constant. So while doing numericals, we are using the formula P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. So Boyle's law states that volume of a given mass of a gas is inversely proportional to its pressure. Next comes Charles' law. The volume of given mass of a gas is directly proportional to absolute temperature. The volume of a given mass of a gas is directly proportional to absolute temperature, and here pressure of the gas is kept constant. So mathematically V is proportional to T, that is at constant pressure, or we can say P proportional to T, then volume must be kept constant. So when V is proportional to T, so V by T becomes constant. So when V is proportional to T, V by T will remain constant. And therefore V1 by T1 is equal to V2 by T2 can be used while doing numericals. So for Boyle's law, the formula which we are using is P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2, and for Charles' law we are using V1 by T1 is equal to V2 by T2 while doing numericals. Now combined gas laws. Combined gas laws are combined gas equation PV is equal to nRT. Here N is the number of moles of gas. So N stands for number of moles. N stands for number of moles of gas. P pressure, V volume. R is known as gas constant, or R is actually known as even universal gas constant. And the various units of R and values of R are as follows. R is equal to 0.0821 liters atmospheres per mole per Kelvin we have. In SI units, R is equal to 8.314 joule per mole per Kelvin we have. And in ergs, it is 8.314 into 10 to the power of 7 ergs we have. When it comes to calorie, the value is 1.99 calorie per mole per Kelvin. While doing problems, the value can be taken as nearly equal to 2 calorie per mole per Kelvin. So these values we need to remember while doing the problems. So once again, R is equal to 0.0821, units are liters atmospheres per mole per Kelvin, or 8.314, so many joule per mole per Kelvin, 8.314 10 to the power of 7 ergs per mole per Kelvin, 1.99 or else nearly equal to 2 calorie per mole per Kelvin. These values must be remembered. Then comes Dalton's law of partial pressures. Now here, in a mixture of several gases, the total pressure of the system will be equal to sum of the partial pressures. So when you take a gaseous system, if the gaseous system has two gases, something like say nitrogen and hydrogen here, the total gas of the mixture is given as sum of the pressures of N2 and then H2. The individual pressures are called partial pressures. And the Dalton's law is basically applicable only for chemically non-reacting gases. Means we cannot apply Dalton's law for a mixture of gases like say H2 and say F2, say H2 and say Cl2, and say ammonia gas plus HCl gas. For such type of pairs, we cannot apply Dalton's law. Means Dalton's law is basically applicable to chemically non-reacting gases. So the total pressure is given by P1 plus P2 plus P3 plus P4, and P1, P2, P3, P4 are respective partial pressures of the gases. This is regarding Dalton's law of partial pressures. Now comes Graham's law of diffusion. The rate of diffusion of a gas is inversely proportional to square root of its density. Rate of diffusion is inversely proportional to square root of its density. So heavier gas will not diffuse fastly. A lighter gas only diffuses fastly. So R, that is the rate of diffusion, is inversely proportional to square root of its density. So mathematically, R1 by R2 means when you're comparing for two different gases, R1 by R2 is equal to square root of d2 by d1, also equal to square root of m2 by m1. See, molar mass and density are related to each other. Let us see how they are related to each other. See, from the gas equation, PV is equal to nRT. So PV is equal to W by M into RT, or else PM is equal to W by V into RT. Then PM is equal to DRT. So at a given temperature and a pressure, if these two are kept constant here, we can say density of the gas is directly proportional to the molar mass. Therefore, density can be replaced by the molar mass in terms of proportionality. So we have R1 by RT is equal to root of D2 by D1 or else root of M2 by M1. This is regarding Graham's law of diffusion. Then comes kinetic theory of the gases. Kinetic theory of the gases. Gas molecules have negligible volume and do not have force of attraction between them. Gas molecules are too smaller in size. Therefore, gas molecules have negligible volume when compared to volume of the vessel in which they are present, and they do not have any force of attraction. That is between the gas molecules. And molecules move randomly, and therefore molecules collide with each other as well as with even walls of the container also. So molecules move randomly and therefore they are colliding with each other as well as with the walls of the container. In the process of collision, here total amount of energy remains same. Therefore, these collisions are called perfectly elastic in nature. So, elastic collisions means during the collisions here, energy will not be lost. Total energy of the system always remains the same. There may be energy transfer from one molecule to another molecule during collisions, but total amount of energy always remains same. Such type of collisions are said to be elastic collisions. So, gas molecular collisions are perfectly elastic in nature. And coming towards pressure, the pressure exerted by the gas is due to the collisions by molecules on the walls of the vessel. So when molecules are moving, they are colliding with each other as well as with the walls also. But the pressure of the gas is because of the collisions made by the gas molecules on the walls of the container. But the collisions among themselves will not lead to the pressure. The pressure is only because of the collisions by the molecules on the walls of the container and not among themselves. Then the average kinetic energy of the molecule is directly proportional to absolute temperature. So energy of the system depends upon the temperature. So we can say mathematically Ke is directly proportional to absolute temperature. So higher the temperature, we can say higher the kinetic energy of the molecules. Now comes kinetic gas equation. So kinetic gas equation is PV is equal to 1/3 mnc square here. In PV is equal to 1/3 mnc square, the small m stands for mass of each molecule, mass of molecule here, mass of molecule, and then n is equal to number of molecules here, number of molecules. N is the number of molecules there, and C is the RMS velocity. C is the RMS velocity of the molecules. So normally we say small m whenever it comes in the gas class, we take it as number of moles. But in this case, N stands for the number of molecules of the system, and M is not the molar mass. M is the mass of the molecule here. So kinetic gas equation is PV is equal to 1/3 mnc square. 1/3 mnc square. P and V are pressure and the volume of the system. Then comes a different type of molecular velocities. The first one is RMS velocity. RMS velocity means when you suppose there are three molecules, say C1, C2 and C3, RMS velocity will be equal to RMS is equal to this. We should square the velocities first and then take the average of the squares, means we are adding the three squares and then dividing by 3. We are going to get average average of the squares of the velocities, and then we need to take root over this. That is said to be root mean square velocity. Means we are taking the squares, taking the mean of the squares, and taking root over the mean of the squares. That is said to be root mean square velocity. So n is the total number of molecules here, and C1, C2, C3 are the velocities of different molecules. And then RMS velocity can also be given by other relations as root 3 PV by m or root 3 RT by m or root 3 P by D we have, where D is the density, P is the pressure. So main formula we use in the various cases will be square root of 3 RT by m. This is mainly used in various problems regarding the root mean square velocity. Then other molecular velocities are most probable velocity, which is the velocity possessed by maximum number of molecules, which is called most probable velocity. It is given by root over 2 RT by m, and this is a average velocity, normal average only, that is given as root 8 RT by pi m. This is average velocity. So these three formula we need to remember. That is root mean square velocity, root 3 RT by m, most probable velocity, root of 2 RT by m, average velocity, root of 8 RT by pi m. All these three velocities formulas we need to remember. Now let us take the relationship between the average velocity, root mean square velocity, and most probable velocity. So from the formulas we can get the ratios of these three. So we know that most probable velocity is equal to square root of 2 RT by m, and average velocity is equal to square root of 8 RT by pi m is to root of 3 RT by m. These are the basic formulas for these three velocities. We can remove RT by m throughout because all have common RT by m, RT by m. So we are left with here root 2 is to, it is root of 8 by pi here is to root of 3. To make it further simple, divide throughout by root 2. So therefore it is root 2 by root 2 is to root 8 by pi by root 2 is to root 3 by root 2. On simplification, we are going to get 1 is to 1.128 is to 1.224. So one has to remember this ratio of the molecular velocities. So importance of the ratios of the velocities is when they are giving us, say for example, RMS velocity is given to us, we can find out remaining two velocities provided we know the ratio of the three molecular velocities. That is the importance of the ratios of the three molecular velocities. Therefore, the velocities ratio is to be remembered. Next one. Now kinetic energy of the gas, which is given by 3 by 2 nRT, where n is a number of moles of the gas. Here there are three formulas to remember for kinetic energy. So kinetic energy is given by 3 by 2 nRT. This comes for n moles of gas. N moles of gas. Suppose n is equal to 1, then 3 by 2 RT will come. This is for 1 mole of gas, which is equal to, if you are dividing R by Avogadro's number into T, then you are going to get kinetic energy per 1 molecule of gas. And R by N is a constant which is replaced by K, where K is called Boltzmann constant. So this formula gives kinetic energy for n moles of a gas. This gives per 1 mole of a gas. This gives for 1 molecule of a gas, where K is a Boltzmann constant we have. So average kinetic energy is equal to 3 by 2 nRT, and if you take average means it is to be per molecule. So 3 by 2 R by N into T we have. So 3 by 2 KT, where K is called Boltzmann constant, R by N. The value, that is, we have to substitute value of R divided by Avogadro's number. We are going to get 1.38 into 10 to the power of minus 23, so many joule per Kelvin. This is a numerical value of the Boltzmann constant, that is 1.380, 10 to the power of minus 23 we have. Then comes the properties of ideal gas and that of real gas. Ideal gas always obeys the basic gas equation, which is PV is equal to nRT. and then on under all conditions of temperature and pressure. Ideal gases do not have the force of attractions or repulsions between the gas molecules. So they will be having zero force of attraction, we can say, and the volume of the gas molecules will be negligible. These are the main 2 points in the case of ideal gas. That is, they do not have force of attractions or repulsions, and then their volume means gas molecules volume is negligible. We can say they are point volumes. And when you see the H2 and then helium, two smaller molecules, therefore, hence they behave almost ideal. Because if you have a larger molecules, what happens is, then because of larger size of the molecules, they are going to have more van der Waals forces. When they have more van der Waals forces, they are going to deviate from the ideal behavior. Hence, H2 and helium being two small molecules, they always behave in ideal state. So, more the attractive forces, we can see more the deviation from the ideal behavior, because ideal gas do not have any force of attraction. Therefore, if you have attractive forces, they are deviating. Hence, more the attractive forces, we can see more the deviation from ideal behavior. So, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide gases deviate more from ideal behavior. That is because they have a higher molar mass and they experience actually force of attractions when compared to that of helium and hydrogen. So heavy molar mass gases always deviate more from the gas laws. Then coming towards real gases, it's opposite to ideal gas. These gas molecules have definite volume, and then they exert force of attraction on the other molecules. In the ideal gases, they do not have volume, no force of attraction. In the real gases, they have definite volume and they have attractive forces on the other molecules. They are said to be the real gases. Now, any gas behaves almost ideally at higher temperature and low pressure. Any gas almost behaves ideally, that is to high temperature and low pressure. What happens under these two conditions? When you take high temperature and low pressure, the molecules will be moving far away from each other. When they are far away from each other, the force of attractions between the molecules will be negligible. That is one of the conditions for ideal gas. Therefore, at very higher temperature and then low pressure, the gas molecules always behave ideally because of larger intermolecular spaces present between them at very high temperature. They do not have attractive forces. Therefore, the molecules behave ideally at very high temperature. Now comes van der Waals equation of state, which is P plus A n squared by V squared into V minus NB is equal to nRT, is called van der Waals equation of state. P plus A n squared by V squared into V minus NB is equal to nRT, where A and B are van der Waals constants, and then A n squared by V squared, this term is said to be pressure correction, and then NB is said to be volume correction to the ideal gas. So in the formula, A n squared by V square, A n squared by V square is said to be pressure correction and NB is said to be volume correction there. And here one more point is A n squared by V square is actually a measure of attractive forces present between the gas molecules. And then NB is a measure of the molecular size. So A n squared by V square, the pressure correction is actually because of the attractive forces, and volume correction is actually because of the molecular size of the molecules. This is regarding van der Waals equation of state. Then at very high temperature and low pressure, A n squared by V square and NB are small. See, at high temperature, whenever we have larger intermolecular spaces, the attractive forces will be very much less. And A n squared by V square signifies only force of attractions. When there are very much less attractive forces, the gases start behaving ideally. And then even larger volume means the volume of the molecules are going to be negligible because of the larger volume of the gas. So finally, the volume of the molecules are negligible and they don't have force of attractions at high temperature and low pressure. Therefore, the gases behave ideally. Hence, the van der Waals equation under these two conditions becomes equal to PV is equal to nRT. So high temperature, we can ignore AN square by V square, very low pressure, we can ignore value of NB. Finally, it comes out to be PV is equal to nRT. Then, plasma state is the fourth state of the matter which exists only at high temperature, and high temperature, that is at high temperatures, because of ionization of the gas molecules, we have only positive nuclei and electrons are present. So plasma state mainly contains only positive nuclei and electrons in that, because plasma state exists only at high temperature. High temperature means ionization of the gas molecules takes place. And then triple point. Triple point stands for when all three states of matter exist in equilibrium, that is said to be a triple point. All three states means here gas phase, liquid phase and solid phase. All three must be in equilibrium. That point is defined as a triple point. So it is state of a substance where substance can exist substance can exist in equilibrium, that is solid, liquid and the gaseous state we have. For example, when you consider water molecule, ice, solid state, water, liquid state, water vapor, gaseous state, all three should exist at equilibrium, and the conditions are at 4.58 millimeters of pressure and then 0.0098 Celsius. All three states of H2O exist equilibrium simultaneously. So that point is called triple point. So triple point, at triple point, all three states of matter will be in equilibrium. Three states of matter means here gas phase, liquid phase and solid phase. All three must be in equilibrium. Such a point is said to be a triple point. Then comes compressibility factor. Compressibility factor is a ratio between PV and nRT of the gas. PV and nRT of the gas itself is called compressibility factor. Let us try to understand the ratio between PV and nRT through an example. Now, when you take value of Z, which is equal to PV, say for 1 mole of a gas, so it will be equal to PV by RT now. So, for a given gas, at a given temperature and then pressure, means for an ideal gas, we expect certain volume. At a given temperature and pressure, ideal gas will be having certain volume. Suppose the volume is less than its ideal volume, then the P into V is going to be less than RT then now. Means at a given temperature, if the volume is less than its ideal volume, so product PV will be less than RT. If PV is less than RT, then the value of Z will be equal to less than 1. And then when the PV will be equal to less than RT means if they are occupying lesser volume than ideal volume. Lesser volume means the molecules are coming close to each other, and that is possible only if they are experiencing strong force of attraction between the molecules. So whenever molecules are experiencing attractive forces, then the compressibility factor is going to be less than 1. Suppose the volume of the gas, say take same PV by RT. Suppose the volume of the gas is more than the expected volume of the gas. When this is more, then product PV should be more than RT. In such a case, Z value will be equal to more than 1. Then, when the volume is more than the expected volume, the molecules are slightly moving away from each other. That is possible if they are experiencing the repulsions. So, the compressibility factor, when the gas experiences repulsions, Z will be more than 1. When it comes to ideal gas, the value of Z is always equal to 1 because ideal gas do not have any force of attraction or repulsion between the molecules. That is regarding the compressibility factor. So, compressibility factor Z will be less than 1 means they are having lesser volume than expected volume. So, PV is less than RT. They have lesser volume means they are experiencing more force of attraction. Suppose volume is more than the expected volume means they are experiencing repulsions. Therefore, PV is equal to more than RT. So, whenever gas molecules experience repulsions, then the compressibility factor Z is going to be more than 1. Let us come back once. So, for carbon dioxide gas at low pressure, Z value is less than 1. At low pressure, the molecules are very much close and they experience the force of attraction. Thereby, the value of PV is less than RT. However, when you take at very higher pressures, the molecules are too close and start experiencing repulsion. Thereby, the value of PV will be more than RT. Hence, Z will be greater than RT for that. So, molecules are too close, they start repelling. Molecules are far away, they start attracting with each other. So, therefore, Z is equal to less than 1. Suppose Z is equal to less than 1 means here the molecules are experiencing attractive force. In such a state, gas can be easily liquefiable. So a liquefiable gas will always have Z value less than 1. Means they are occupying less volume. That is because of force of attractions operating between the molecules. This is regarding compressibility factor. Now, when it comes to helium and then hydrogen, when it comes to this hydrogen and then helium, Z value is always found to be more than 1 because for these two molecules, attractive forces are always negligible. Attractive forces are always negligible. When they have negligible attractive forces here, the PV will be always greater than RT. If they have strong force of attractions only, PV can be less than RT. So PV is more than RT means in this case, so Z value will be equal to more than RT, more than 1 in the case of hydrogen and then helium. Then the van der Waals constants. So here in the van der Waals equation we have value A and B. Those two are called van der Waals constants. Let us see the significance of van der Waals constant. Now the term A n square by V square, A n square by V square signifies the attractive forces between the molecules. Therefore the term A gives the force of attraction. So higher the value of A, we can say the gas can be easily liquefied. Higher value of A, we can say the gas can be easily liquefied here now. Then when it comes to the units of A and then B, van der Waals constants, they can be obtained from dimensional analysis. That is, if you are observing the equation P plus A n square by V square into V minus B is equal to RT. Now, A n square by V square must have units of pressure, because we are adding this term to pressure term there now. So A n square by V square should have units of pressure, that is atmospheres. Hence A will be equal to, A must have units of atmospheres into the volume square is there, that is it should be liter square by n square is there, it should going to be mole square here. Therefore it will be atmospheres liter square per mole square you have. When it comes to units of B, the B will be having, it should be NB here for n moles of a gas, NB. V minus NB we have. So NB should have units of volume. So NB you should have units of volume. That is to say, which is equal to liters it should have. So B will be equal to so many liters by mole you have, or as liters per mole is a unit of B. So units of A and then B can be obtained from dimensional analysis, that is equating the units we can get. Then comes the values of A and then B. The values of A and B will not be constant for a given gas also if you are changing the pressure and then temperature. So values of A and B are different for different gases, and for a given gas also the values will not be constant with the pressure as well as temperature. Then comes boil temperature. What is the meaning of boil temperature? So it is a temperature at which real gases behave ideal gases over a wide range of the pressure. So boil temperature is the temperature at which the real gas behaves ideally over a wide range of pressure, and that is given by TB is equal to A by RB. So TB is a boil temperature. Here A and then B are van der Waals constant. So TB is given by A by RB. Then comes critical phenomena. Critical temperature, critical pressure, critical volume. Let us see the meaning of critical temperature. Suppose when you consider the carbon dioxide gas, its critical temperature is found to be 31.1 degrees Celsius. It means when you are cooling carbon dioxide gas to this temperature, by applying pressure on this one, then the gas can be liquefied now. So means if you are not cooling up to this temperature, the carbon dioxide gas cannot be liquefied though you apply any amount of the pressure. So critical temperature is defined as the temperature below which the gas can be liquefied by application of the pressure. So in the case of carbon dioxide gas, we need to cool up to 31.1 degrees Celsius, and at the temperature by applying pressure, it can be liquefied. It can be cooled further low also, but the temperature 31.1, that is below which the gas can be liquefied, but not above which the gas cannot be liquefied, whatever may be the pressure, that can be defined as critical temperature. Critical temperature is given by 8A by 27 RB, critical temperature of a gas. Then comes critical pressure, that is the pressure of the gas, the minimum pressure required to liquefy a gas at critical temperature. So, in the case of carbon dioxide gas, at 31.1 degrees Celsius, we need to apply certain amount of pressure. The pressure that must be applied, the minimum pressure. You can apply even more pressure than that value also, but minimum pressure that must be applied at critical temperature itself is called critical pressure, and that is given by Pc is equal to A by 27 B square. Finally, critical volume. Critical volume is the volume of 1 mole of a gas under critical state, means not critical state, under the critical conditions we have. So volume of 1 mole of a gas at the Tc and Pc itself is said to be Vc, and Vc is equal to 3B. So we need to remember all these three relations, that is a Tc is equal to 8A by 27 RB, Pc is equal to A by 27 B square, and Vc is equal to 3B. All these three formulas must be remembered. Then comes Joule-Thomson effect. Joule-Thomson effect. Now, it is a change in the temperature when a gas is allowed to pass through a narrow orifice from high pressure to low pressure. For example, when you take adiabatic conditions, if you are allowing the gas to expand from higher pressure to low pressure, we can observe the decrease of the temperature. So the cooling effect can be observed under adiabatic conditions there now. That is why the cooling effect is observed when the gas is allowed to expand from high pressure to low pressure is when the gas is allowed to expand means gas molecules are moving away from each other. Actually, they have attractive forces. When they are moving away from each other means they are overcoming their own attractive forces. To overcome the attractive forces, we require energy, or the molecules require energy, and there they are spending their own energies, and then they are overcoming the attractive forces. Because of the loss of energy, we can see a drop of temperature. So therefore, in adiabatic conditions, whenever a gas is allowed to expand on its own, we can see a decrease of temperature. That itself is called Joule-Thomson effect. So a cooling effect can be observed under adiabatic conditions. If the conditions are same, isothermal conditions, since we are keeping temperature constant there we cannot see a drop of temperature happening or increase of temperature happening, means there we say there is no Joule-Thomson effect here. When delta H is equal to 0, no Joule-Thomson effect. So if it is having a cooling effect, we say that it is a positive Joule-Thomson effect. We can say the delta T means we can see a decrease of temperature. Suppose temperature has increased, so delta T is equal to positive, then that is said to have a negative Joule-Thomson effect. Negative Joule-Thomson. If it experiences, say, rise in temperature, then that is said to have negative Joule-Thomson effect, that is heating effect. So heating effect is considered to be negative Joule-Thomson effect, delta T is positive, and cooling effect is said to be positive Joule-Thomson effect, and delta T is equal to negative value. And under isothermal conditions, because we are keeping temperature constant, we cannot see either increase or decrease of temperature. And this is regarding Joule-Thomson effect. Then comes the idle gases. Idle gases do not show the heating or else cooling effect. Delta T is always equal to 0. The heating, they are not showing heating or cooling effect. That is because they do not have any force of attraction. Therefore, the molecules need not do work to overcome the attractive forces. When there are no attractive forces, no work is being done, and therefore no energy is being spent. Hence, we cannot see a decrease of temperature. So therefore, idle gases do not show either heating or cooling effect. Hence, delta T value will be equal to 0. is completely regarding Joule-Thomson effect. Then comes inversion temperature. It is a temperature, say, is represented as Ti, below which the gas molecules will show cooling effect during Joule-Thomson expansion. So, to experience Joule-Thomson effect, the molecules must have attractive forces. Unless the molecules have attractive forces, they will not experience Joule-Thomson effect. Therefore, to experience Joule-Thomson effect, the gases must be cooled to certain temperature so that they start experiencing the force of attractions. So, the temperature to which they must be cooled to experience force of attraction itself is called inversion temperature. So means below the inversion temperature, the gas molecules start experiencing Joule-Thomson effect. That is, they start experiencing the cooling effect. Above that, cooling effect cannot be seen. So the values of Ti values for H2 is minus 80 Celsius and Ti value of helium is minus 240 Celsius we have. So if molecules have stronger attractive forces, then the Ti value is going to be higher. Since Ti value is very much less for helium, means it is having very much lower attractive forces. Then comes mean free path. Is average distance traveled between the molecules between two successive collisions. Means when you take a molecule, say moving from a point A, since molecules randomly move in all directions, they will be colliding with each other. So let us suppose it is hitting another molecule B. Because of collision, it will be changing its direction. Let us suppose direction is something like this. Again hits with some other molecule, say D here. Again some other molecule, and so on and so forth we have now. Now the total distance traveled between all these three collisions means AB, it is AB plus, it is BC plus, it is CD. Total number of collisions are 3. So now this is a total distance traveled by number of collisions. Itself is called the mean free path. So mean free path is a average distance traveled by a molecule between two successive collisions. It's represented as lambda. The collision number Z stands for the number of collisions made by a single molecule per second. Number of collisions made by a molecule in per second itself is called collision number, and collision frequency means it is a total number of collisions made by all molecules per unit volume per second. So collision frequency is total number of collisions by all molecules per unit volume per second, and collision number is collisions made by only one molecule per second. Mean free path is average distance traveled by a molecule between two successive collisions. Now we'll discuss thermodynamics and thermochemistry. Thermodynamics deals with interconversion of heat energy with other forms of energy. Interconversion of heat energy with other forms of energy. Thermodynamics deals with macroscopic systems consisting of matter in bulk and not microscopic systems of individual atoms or molecules. So deals with the macroscopic systems but not microscopic systems of individual atoms or molecules. That is, in thermodynamics, we discuss properties of a system as a whole, but we do not discuss the properties of constituents of the system. We do not discuss the properties of constituents of the system. Thermodynamic equilibrium. It means the system should have the following three equilibria simultaneously. System must have the following three equilibria simultaneously. The first one, thermal equilibrium. Heat should not flow from one part of a system to another part of same system. That is, throughout the system, temperature must remain constant. So T is constant so that temperature heat will not flow from one part to another part. That is said to be thermal equilibrium. Then mechanical equilibrium. Mechanical work is done due to the pressure difference. So when you have, consider a cylinder with a gas having freely movable piston. Consider a cylinder having a gas with a freely mobile piston, freely mobile piston. When pressure is applied on the piston moves down and work is done on the system. Pressure is applied here, piston moves down and work is done on the system. So the work is done due to the pressure difference. Now mechanical equilibrium means throughout the system pressure must remain same. Throughout the system pressure must remain same. That is said to be mechanical equilibrium. Means so that when pressure is same throughout the system, one part of a system does not do work on the other part of a system. When pressure is same throughout, one part of a system does not do work on the other part of a system. That is said to be mechanical equilibrium. Then comes chemical equilibrium. No change in the composition of any part any part of the system with time. That is to say, throughout the system, composition must remain same. Throughout the system, composition must remain same. That is, no change in the composition of any part of the system with time. If the three equilibria exist, then it is said to be in thermodynamic equilibrium. So thermodynamic equilibrium means thermal equilibrium, temperature remains same, mechanical equilibrium, pressure remains same, chemical equilibrium, composition remains the same. Then different types of systems. First one is open system, a system which can exchange matter as well as energy with surroundings. You can take hot liquid in open beaker, hot liquid in an open beaker. Suppose when you consider a vessel having some hot liquid here, vessel having hot liquid, so vapors can be seen now. Means it will be exchanging vapors with the surroundings, means mass is being exchanged. It also exchanges the heat with the surroundings now. So therefore, a hot liquid in open beaker exchanges both mass, there is a vapors here, as well as the energy. That can be considered as an open system. Closed system can exchange energy but not the matter with surroundings. When you take the same beaker consisting of water here, means hot liquid here, say hot liquid is there, and if you are closing this with a lid, then as it is closed with a lid, it cannot exchange matter with surroundings, but energy can be exchanged because it is a vessel, it's a metal vessel, so energy can be exchanged with the surroundings. It is said to be a closed system. Closed system means it cannot exchange matter but exchange energy with the surroundings. Isolated system, it cannot exchange neither matter nor energy with the surroundings. So both matter as well as energy cannot exchange with the surroundings. So any liquid in thermally isolated closed container like thermos flask. In thermal flask, heat cannot be exchanged. If it is closed, even matter also cannot be exchanged. Such a system can be called as isolated system. So three systems we have. Then comes the properties of system. Properties of system. The property of a system which is independent of the size and the mass. So independent of the size and the mass is said to be intensive property of a system. Temperature, density, surface tension, etc. These are the properties. These are the properties which are depending upon the nature of system. And intensive property is not additive property. Is not additive property means we cannot add density of two liquids to get the final density of the mixture. We cannot add density of two different liquids to get the final density of the mixture. So intensive property is not additive property. It depends upon nature, doesn't depend upon how much amount we take. Then comes extensive property. Extensive property depends upon the amount of the substance which we take. Amount which we take, that is to say mass, volume, etc. That is depends upon how much we take and doesn't depend upon what we take. Depends on how much we take but not on what we take. And it is an extensive property is additive property of a system, means 10 grams of one substance 10 grams of one substance plus 10 grams of another substance if you take, you are going to get 20 grams of the mixture. 20 grams of mixture we can get now. Means we are in a position to add we are positioned to add 10 grams of one substance to 10 grams of another to get the 20 grams of the mixture. So the mass is going to be additive in nature. Hence, mass is said to be extensive property. So property which depends upon how much we take, not on what we take, itself is called extensive property. Then comes the state function and path function. We have state and path functions now. The value of the property of the system which depends on the current state, depends upon the current state of a system and is independent of the path. Depends upon the current state of a system and independent of path itself is called state function. Itself is called state function. So properties such as temperature, pressure, volume, energy, enthalpy, entropy, free energy come under state functions. Temperature, pressure, volume, energy, enthalpy, entropy, free energy are coming under state functions. And work done and Q, heat absorbed. These two are path functions, they are not state functions. So work and then work and amount of heat absorbed or liberated will be coming under path functions, not the state functions. Then the process. The meaning of process. Process defines the way in which system changes its position from one thermodynamic state to another thermodynamic state. The defines the process means defines the way in which a system changes its position from one thermodynamic state to another thermodynamic state. Now different types of processes we have. They are isothermal, adiabatic, reversible, irreversible process, isobaric and isochoric process. Different type of processes. So a process means or process defines the way in which system changes its position from one thermodynamic state to another thermodynamic state. Let us take different type of processes now. Adiabatic process. Adiabatic process is one where no heat is exchanged between the system and surroundings. No heat is exchanged between the system and surroundings. That is, dq is equal to 0. dq is equal to 0. That is, this takes place in thermally isolated system. Thermally isolated, no heat exchange must happen. That is said to be thermally isolated one. From first law, dE is equal to dq plus dw, and applying adiabatic conditions here, dq is equal to 0. That implies dE must be equal to dw. Then dE must be equal to dw. That is to say, dE becomes dw if at all dq is equal to 0. That is, work is done at the expense of its energy. So work is done at the expense of its energy. So work done on the system will increase the energy of the system, and then work done by the system will decrease the energy of the system. If work is done on the system will increase energy of the system, work is done by the system will decrease the energy of the system. This is coming under adiabatic process. Isothermal process. Here the temperature of the system remains constant throughout. If temperature is kept constant, that is said to be isothermal process. To keep temperature constant, heat is exchanged between system and surroundings. To keep temperature constant, heat is exchanged between system and surroundings. So temperature being constant, we can take temperature being constant, energy of system will not change, therefore D is equal to 0. When temperature is constant, energy remains same. Energy remains same means D is equal to 0. Again, from first law of thermodynamics, D is equal to dq plus dw, and here since D is equal to 0, we can say dw is equal to minus dE. dw is equal to minus dE. So if work is done, the system work is done by the system, heat is absorbed. If work is done by the system, heat is absorbed. If work is done on the system, heat is liberated. If work is done on the system, heat is liberated because it has maintained same temperature. Means, so work done on the system is equal to amount of heat liberated. Work done by the system is equal to amount of heat absorbed. amount of it absorbed. So that is work is done by the system means heat is absorbed. If work is done on the system means heat is liberated, such a way that energy remains same. So in isothermal process, temperature remains the same, energy remains same, and therefore dE is equal to 0 in isothermal process. Next, isochoric process. Isochoric process, volume remains the same. Isochoric process, volume remains same. So therefore delta V is equal to 0. When delta V is equal to 0, work is not done by the system. When there is no work done, dW remains 0. Again from first law of thermodynamics, since dW is equal to 0, dE becomes equal to dQ. dE becomes equal to dQ. So heat absorbed by the system is used to increase the energy of the system. Heat absorbed by the system is used to increase the internal energy of the system. That is D is equal to dQ we have, because work done is 0 in isochoric process. Then comes isobaric process. Isobaric process, here there is no change of pressure, implies delta P is equal to 0. No change of pressure, delta P is equal to 0 in the case of isobaric process. Then cyclic process we have. If system returns to its initial state after a series of processes is called cyclic process. If a system returns to its initial state after a series of processes, it is said to be a cyclic process. Initial and final states are same in a cyclic process. Say for example, a system is moving from A to B, changing from A to B here, A to B, again say from B to C, and if at all C is moving back to again A, then that is A to B, B to C, C to A, it is said to be a cyclic process. So initial and final states became equal to A here now. So in cyclic process, initial and final states are same. So therefore state functions will be 0. Difference in state functions remains 0 in a cyclic process. Hence delta E, delta H is equal to 0, because initial and final states are same in cyclic process. Then comes reversible and irreversible processes. A reversible process is one where driving force is always infinitesimally greater than the opposing force. Such that system is in a series of equilibrium states. That is, a reversible process is one where driving force is always infinitesimally greater than the opposing force, such that system is in a series of equilibrium states. Hence, the process can be reversed by at any instant by increasing the opposing force by infinitesimally small amount. By increasing the opposing force by infinitesimally small amount, the process can be reversed. Such a process is said to be a reversible process. Theoretically, it takes infinite time to complete a reversible process. Then comes irreversible process. Irreversible process is one which takes place in one step, and there is an equilibrium only in initial and final states of the system. Here, equilibrium exists but only in initial and final states of the system, whereas in the reversible process, equilibrium exists in each and every step of the process. There's a difference between reversible and then irreversible process we have. Then comes the meaning of internal energy of a system. Internal energy of a system. Internal energy of a system is energy possessed by it due to its chemical nature and its thermodynamic state. It is the sum of various types of energies of the system. That is, sum of, we can take rotational energy, vibrational energy, translational energy, nuclear energy, electronic energy, etc. We have. It is sum of various types of energies of the system itself is called internal energy, which is equal to sum of rotational energy, vibrational energy, and translational energy, nuclear energy, electronic energy, etc. We have summation of all energies. And internal energy of the elements in their standard state is taken, means is defined as 0, is taken as 0. The internal energy of the elements in their standard state is taken as 0. Say for example, if you take carbon, say in graphite stage, carbon in graphite form, the energy is taken as 0. If you take sulfur in rhombic state, energy is taken as 0. If you take bromine in liquid state, its energy is taken as 0. Like that, the elements in their standard state, energy is taken as 0. The internal energy is taken as 0 for the elements in their standard states. Then comes the meaning of enthalpy. Enthalpy of a system is the total heat content of the system. The total heat content of the system is the enthalpy of a system and is defined and is given by enthalpy H is equal to E plus PV. When you take the difference, delta H is equal to delta E plus P delta V we have. Delta H is equal to delta E plus P delta V we have. And from PV is equal to nRT, if pressure and temperature are kept constant, and if volume changes, that should be due to change in the number of moles of a system. If pressure and temperature are kept constant, and if at all volume changes, that should be due to change in the number of moles. Therefore, we can write P delta V is equal to as RT delta N you have. So here P and T are kept constant. So volume is changing here because of change in the number of moles of the system. Therefore, delta H is equal to delta E can be written as RT delta N. Means P delta V here, P delta V is replaced by RT delta N, where delta N is equal to change in the number of moles of gaseous products minus gaseous reactants. Change in the number of moles of gaseous products and gaseous reactants we have. Let us take an example and understand that. So reaction N2N3H2 giving rise to 2NH3. Here delta N is equal to number of moles of gaseous products, that is 2 we have, so 2 here, minus number of moles of gaseous reactants, that is 1 here and 3 here we have, altogether 4, minus 2. So minus 2 is called delta N of this reaction. And if delta H is equal to minus 90 kilojoules at 298 Kelvin, what is the value of delta E for the reaction? So delta E is given by delta H minus RT delta N from the reaction given to us. And the value is equal to delta E is, you should find out delta E value. Now, delta H is given as 90 kilojoules per mole. So substituting the reaction, finally you are going to get minus 85.04 kilojoules. And value of R is taken as 8.314 10 to the power of minus 3. The value comes in so many kilojoules per mole per Kelvin. So this is how to calculate the problems related to delta H and delta E, and delta N stands for number of moles of gaseous products minus number of moles of gaseous reactants we have. Then work done in isothermal and adiabatic reversible processes. The formulas of work done in isothermal and adiabatic reversible processes. Work done in isothermal reversible process is given by W is equal to minus 2.303 nRT log V2 by V1 minus 2.303 nRT log V2 by V1, where V1 is the initial volume, V2 is a final volume at a constant temperature T we have, or else W is also equal to minus 2.303 nRT log P1 by P2. We know that volume is inversely proportional to pressure, and therefore we can replace V2 by P1 and then V1 by P2 we can replace. So any of these two can be used to find out the work done in isothermal reversible process. Then comes work done in adiabatic reversible process. That is given by work done is equal to NCV T2 NCV T1 minus T2 we have, where CV stands for molar heat capacity at a constant volume. CV stands for molar heat capacity at a constant volume. NCV delta T or NCV T1 minus T2 gives the amount of work done in adiabatic reversible process. Then thermochemistry. Thermochemistry deals with the study of enthalpy change during a physical and chemical process. It deals with the study of enthalpy change during physical and chemical processes. Physical change involves process like melting of the ice, melting you can say boiling of a liquid, and transition of a substance from one allotropic form to another allotropic form. So physical change involves the melting of substances, boiling of liquids, excuse me, and transition of one substance from one allotropic form to another allotropic form. Then meaning of thermochemical equation. Thermochemical equation. A balanced chemical equation in which the physical states of reactants and products along with the energy change and temperature at which reaction are given. It's a balanced chemical equation in which physical states of reactants and products along with the energy change and the temperature at which reaction takes place are given. That is called thermochemical equation. So it indicates the enthalpy change during physical or chemical process. Say for example, carbon dioxide plus oxygen. So carbon solid substance, oxygen gaseous state we have. Giving carbon dioxide gas, enthalpy change is minus 393.5. Suppose if temperature is not given, it is understood that reaction takes place at 25 degrees Celsius, that is 298 Kelvin. So in a reaction, if temperature is not given, it is understood that reaction takes place at 25 degrees Celsius we have. Then if heat is liberated in an exothermic reaction, then delta H is equal to negative for us. Heat is absorbed in endothermic reaction, and so delta H value is positive. Heat is given off in exothermic reaction, delta H is negative. Heat is absorbed in endothermic reaction, delta H is equal to positive for us. Then comes meaning of enthalpy of a reaction. Enthalpy change involved when number of moles of reactants as indicated by balanced chemical equation have completely reacted under given set of conditions is called enthalpy of reaction. Enthalpy change involved when the number of moles of reactants as indicated by the balanced equation have completely reacted under given set of conditions is called enthalpy of reaction. Say for example H2 plus O2, half O2, say giving rise to H2O. So say delta H is equal to, in this case, suppose delta H is equal to minus 68 kilocalories. So this can be called as enthalpy of reaction. Means when 1 mole of what is being formed under given set of conditions, enthalpy change is minus 68 in this case. So this is called enthalpy change of the reaction. Then enthalpy change depends on what? Enthalpy depends upon the physical states of reactants and products. Same reaction, if you are changing the physical states of reactants and products, the total enthalpy change is going to be different. And if it depends on quantity of reactants also. If you take more amount of substances, once again delta H value changes because delta H is an extensive property, so depends upon the amount of substances which we take. Depends upon the temperature at which reaction takes place. Also depends on temperature, and finally depends on the conditions, that is condition of constant pressure or constant volume maintained during the reaction. Condition of constant pressure, constant volume maintained during the reaction, that is at constant volume or at a constant pressure reaction takes place. That also must be taken into account. So enthalpy of reaction depends upon, that is physical states, quantity of reactants, temperature and external conditions we have. Then different types of heats of formation. The first one is called enthalpy of formation. Enthalpy of formation. Enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of a compound in its standard state is formed from its elements in their standard states is called enthalpy of formation. The enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of compound in its standard state is formed from its elements in their standard state is called standard enthalpy of formation. At a standard state, excuse me, at the standard state, the temperature is 298 Kelvin and pressure is 1 atmosphere. Pressure is 1 atmosphere means that is equivalent to 101.3 kilopascals. At the standard state, the temperature is 298 Kelvin and pressure is 1 atmosphere, which is equal to 101.3 kilopascals. More negative value of enthalpy of formation, more stable the compound, means exothermic compounds are more stable. That is to say, the compound is having lesser energy when compared to that of reactants, implies lesser energy always leads to more stable state. So therefore, exothermic compounds are much more stable when compared to endothermic compounds. Say enthalpy of formation of HF and HCl are given like this, that is to say minus 268.6 and minus 92.3 we have. And so here we can say HF is more stable because HF is having higher heat of formation when compared to that of HCl. Enthalpy of formation can be positive or even negative also. It can be positive or negative. And for exothermic compounds, delta H is negative, and for endothermic compounds, delta H is going to be positive. So heat of formation for HCl and HF are given to us, and the values are different values we have. Now, for example, let us take a reaction to understand. Say carbon plus O2, say gas, giving rise to CO2. Say gas here. Delta H is equal to minus 94 kilocalories. So here 1 mole of compound is formed from constituent elements. So this value can be called as enthalpy of formation of carbon dioxide. Suppose we have another reaction like this, H2 plus Cl2 giving rise to say 2 HCl. Say delta H is given as say minus 44 kilocalories. This minus 44 kilocalories cannot be called as heat of formation of HCl because it is you can say it is heat of reaction. 2 moles of compounds are being formed. We define enthalpy of formation as when 1 mole of compound is to be formed. So therefore, enthalpy of formation of HCl can be written as, so delta H, heat of formation here, enthalpy of formation of HCl will be equal to minus 44 by 2, which is equal to minus 22 kilocalories. So therefore, this delta H value can be called as enthalpy of formation of HCl. So always 1 mole of compound must form from constituent elements. That is defined as enthalpy of formation of the element. Enthalpy of formation of the compound. Now, enthalpy of combustion. The enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of a substance is completely burnt in excess of oxygen. Enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of substance is burned completely in excess of oxygen. And heat is always given, and therefore enthalpy of combustion is always a negative value. So delta H value for heat of combustion will be always negative. Enthalpy of combustion indicates stability of compound also. The enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of substance is completely burned in excess of oxygen, that is said to be enthalpy of combustion. Said to be enthalpy of combustion, and enthalpy of combustion is always a negative value. Let us take 3 examples to understand clearly enthalpy of combustion and enthalpy of formation. Let us take C plus O2 giving rise to CO2. Say delta H1, enthalpy of this reaction. C plus half O2 giving rise to CO, say delta H2, enthalpy of this reaction. CO plus half O2 giving rise to CO2, say delta H3 for this reaction we have now. Now here delta H1 delta H1 is called heat of formation of carbon dioxide because 1 mole of CO2 is formed from the constituent elements there now, and also called heat of combustion of carbon because carbon is burned completely in excess of oxygen. So delta H1 is heat of formation of CO2 as well as heat of combustion of carbon. When you take delta H2, that is called heat of formation of CO, which is called heat of formation of CO, but not called as heat of combustion of carbon because carbon is not burned completely in excess of oxygen. It is only partially burned here. So therefore delta H2 is called heat of formation of CO but not heat of combustion of carbon. Delta H3 can be called as heat of combustion of CO but not as heat of formation of CO2 because here it is not formed from the constituent elements. Therefore delta H3 is a heat of combustion but not heat of formation. There is a basic difference between heat of combustion and heat of formation. Then comes enthalpy of neutralization. Enthalpy of neutralization. So it is a change in enthalpy that occurs when 1 gram equivalent weight of an acid, 1 gram equivalent weight of an acid is completely neutralized by 1 gram equivalent weight of a base. Enthalpy change occurs when 1 gram equivalent weight of an acid is completely neutralized by 1 gram equivalent weight of a base, both being present in dilute solutions. Both being present in dilute solutions because in the case of dilute solutions, ionization will be complete. Ionization will be complete. So for example, when you take say NaOH, sodium hydroxide, in its aqueous solution plus HCl, say aqueous solution, giving rise to NaCl aqueous solution plus H2O. Here energy given off is minus 13.7 kilocalories. 13.7 kilocalories we have. We have taken NaOH aqueous solution, HCl aqueous solution. We have taken a dilute solution in both the cases now. And this means here we have taken say 40 grams here and then say 36.5 grams here. Means you have taken one equivalent of this, one equivalent of this. Under these conditions, whatever heat is given off itself is called heat of neutralization. Now the enthalpy of neutralization of a strong acid and a strong base is always constant and the value is minus 57.3 kilojoules. That is nothing but minus 13.7 kilocalories per mole. Enthalpy of neutralization of a stronger acid and a stronger base is always constant and the value is minus 13.7 kilocalories we have now. That is, in the case of stronger acid and stronger base, the molecule undergoes complete ionization. In the case of stronger acid and stronger base, the molecule undergoes complete ionization. Complete ionization. Therefore, neutralization involves formation of 1 mole of water from 1 mole of H plus and 1 mole of OH minus. Therefore, neutralization involves the formation of only 1 mole of water from 1 mole of H plus and then 1 mole of OH minus we have. It means so 1 mole of H plus 1 mole of OH minus involves giving rise to H2O. Under these conditions, delta H value is equal to minus 13.7 kilocalories we have when you take 1 mole of these two. Now, the enthalpy of neutralization when any one of them or both are weak, the value is different from, that is minus 57.7, different from the value minus 57 we have. That is to say here, now when you take, for example, that is a stronger acid and stronger base here, they undergo complete ionization. So NaOH plus HCl gives rise to NaCl plus H2O. NaOH in its complete aqueous solution we have only Na plus OH minus plus H plus Cl minus, giving rise to Na plus Cl minus plus H2O. So when you see the net reaction is, so here Na plus Cl minus Cl plus are same. So it is only the formation of water molecule from H plus and OH minus. So during the neutralization of strong acid and strong base, only it involves the formation of 1 mole of water from 1 mole of H plus and 1 mole of OH minus. Therefore, the value is always constant. Value is always, it involves only formation of 1 mole of water from that of H plus and OH minus. If one of them or both are weak, the reaction also involves formation of 1 mole of H plus and formation of 1 mole of OH minus and then formation of 1 mole of water. When one or both of them are weak, it has two steps in that. It involves formation of 1 mole of H plus, formation of 1 mole of OH minus, and then it involves the formation of 1 mole of water molecule. Whereas in the case of strong acid and strong base, already we have 1 mole of H plus and 1 mole of OH minus, therefore involves only formation of 1 mole of water from 1 mole of H plus and 1 mole of OH minus in the case of stronger acid. That is to say, when you take NaOH plus say CH3COOH, weaker acid here, forming sodium acetate plus water. In this reaction, this is a weaker acid. Acetic acid is a weaker acid now. It will not ionize completely. And therefore, this also involves the formation of 1 mole of H plus from this. This compound always undergoes complete ionization. It directly gives us 1 mole of OH minus. So, here the value of delta H value will be always lesser than 13.7. Say for example, say the value may be equal to only 13.0 kilocalories here now. The 0.7 has been absorbed for the ionization of weaker acid in this case now. So, excuse me, when strong base and weak acid involves, here, there are two steps. Step 1 is the formation of 1 mole of H plus from weaker acid, which involves absorption of energy, and then formation of 1 mole of water from H plus and OH minus, which liberates energy. Therefore, net value will be always less than 13.7 because it involves formation of H plus from weaker acid, which is an endothermic process. Therefore, in such a case, we can give heat of neutralization as as say minus 57.3 plus heat of ionization. It can be of weak acid or weak base or both. Heat of neutralization will be equal to minus 57.3 plus it should be heat of ionization of weaker acid or weaker base or both. It is going to give us lesser amount of heat because this part is absorbing some amount of heat for that. So, enthalpy of ionization of weaker acid is the difference between minus 57.3 and actual value of enthalpy of neutralization. From the formula we can understand that is to say heat of ionization will be equal to difference between the heat of neutralization here and then 57.3 we have. Weaker the acid or base we can say or base, more is the enthalpy of ionization. So weaker the acid or base, more is the enthalpy of ionization. So more weaker acids will absorb more heat for their ionization. So weaker the acid, greater is the absorption of heat of ionization. Then comes meaning of enthalpy of solution. It is a change in the enthalpy that occurs when 1 mole of solute is dissolved in excess of solvent. 1 mole of solute is dissolved in excess of solvent such that further dilution do not bring any more heat changes. There is no additional heat change. Means for example, let us take sodium sulfate. You have taken 1 mole here, solid substance. That to added here water. Water should be excess here. Water is excess, giving rise to say 2 Na plus, it will be aqueous, plus SO4 minus 2 aqueous. Then some delta H value, so delta H is equal to Q kilocalories now. Now this value can be called as heat of solution, because you have taken here excess of water. So when you add further amount of water also, further dilution should not bring any more heat changes. Itself is said to be enthalpy of solution. And enthalpy of solution depends upon two energy factors. So you can take delta H solution is equal to heat of hydration plus lattice enthalpy, plus it is lattice enthalpy, heat of hydration plus lattice enthalpy. So the value depends upon summation of these two energy factors there now. So if at all hydration energy is more than lattice enthalpy, the heat of solution is going to be negative value. If lattice enthalpy is more than hydration enthalpy, the heat of solution is going to be positive value. So depends upon the heat of hydration as well as the lattice energy. Heat is absorbed when ionic compounds like ammonium chloride is dissolved. It implies that ammonium chloride has more lattice enthalpy than heat of hydration. Therefore, the value is positive. And if at all heat is given, it is said to be negative. That is to say, when you take the compounds like dissolution of concentrated sulfuric acid, heat is evolved. It implies that they have more heat of hydration than their lattice enthalpies. So depends. So heat of solution, well, it depends upon two energy factors: heat of hydration and heat of solution. If heat of hydration is more, then delta H is going to be negative. If lattice enthalpy is more, then the heat of solution is going to be positive value. Then comes enthalpy of transition. Enthalpy of transition. It is a change in the enthalpy that occurs when 1 mole of an element changes from one allotropic form to another allotropic form. It is an enthalpy change that occurs when 1 mole of an element changes from one allotropic form to another allotropic form. Say for example, white phosphorus changing into red phosphorus, delta H is equal to say minus 18 kilojoules. This value is nothing but amount of enthalpy change involving when 1 mole of phosphorus changes from white to red allotropic form. And a negative sign shows that red phosphorus is more stable. Negative sign means it is exothermic in nature. Exothermic in nature means red phosphorus has less energy when compared to white phosphorus. System having less energy is always more stable. Therefore, we can say red phosphorus is more stable than white phosphorus. This is regarding heat of transition. Then enthalpy of fusion. So it is a change in the enthalpy that occurs when 1 mole of a substance changes from solid to liquid state. 1 mole changes from solid to liquid state is called enthalpy of fusion. That is to say, for example, H2O solid, if it becomes say H2O liquid, this enthalpy change can be called as enthalpy of fusion. That is, ice to water can be called as enthalpy of fusion. Enthalpy of vaporization. It is a change in enthalpy that occurs when 1 mole of a substance changes from liquid state to gaseous state. When 1 mole changes from liquid state to gaseous state, that can be called enthalpy of vaporization. Enthalpy of sublimation is equal to summation of fusion plus enthalpy of vaporization here. Now here sublimation means enthalpy change. During sublimation, solid substance directly changes from solid to gaseous state. During sublimation, the substance changes directly from solid to gaseous state. So this involves two steps, that is solid to liquid, liquid to gaseous state, and therefore enthalpy of sublimation is equal to summation of enthalpy of fusion plus enthalpy of vaporization. It involves two steps together. Then comes first law of thermochemistry. First law of thermochemistry, it states that amount of heat required to decompose a compound into its elements is equal to the amount of heat liberated when the same amount of compound is formed from constituent elements. It is defined as the amount of heat required to decompose, to break down, to decompose a compound into elements is equal to amount of heat liberated when same amount of compound is formed from constituent elements. Say for example, if you take H2 plus half O2 giving rise to H2O, giving rise to H2O. That is heat here formation we have taken. Say delta H is equal to minus 395.5. Now when you reverse the reaction H2O giving rise to H2 plus half O2, then here delta H value will be equal to plus, it will be 395.5 kilojoules we have now. That is, enthalpy of formation and decomposition are numerically equal but opposite in sign. Enthalpy of formation and enthalpy of decomposition are numerically equal but opposite in sign. So you have taken the example of water. So formation of water is exothermic in nature and decomposition of water is endothermic in nature. So numerically both the values are same. Numerically both the values are same but opposite in sign. This is a first law of thermodynamics. First law of thermochemistry. Then comes second law of thermochemistry, which is also called Hess law of constant heat summation. Second law of thermochemistry. Now enthalpy change in a reaction is same whether the reaction takes place in one step or in several steps. Enthalpy change in a reaction is same whether the reaction takes place in one step or in several steps. So enthalpy of reaction does not depend on the method employed. Does not depend upon methods employed. So enthalpy change is a state function. Hence it doesn't depend upon the intermediate steps. So enthalpy change in a reaction is same whether the reaction takes place in one step or in several steps. Itself is called Hess law of constant heat summation. Then meaning of bond energy. Bond energy or else bond dissociation energy is the amount of energy required to break 1 mole of bonds. 1 mole of bonds of a particular type in gaseous state. In the gaseous state, bond energy or bond dissociation energy is the amount of energy required to break 1 mole of bonds of a particular type in the gaseous state. In the gaseous state, energy required to break 1 mole of bonds is said to be bond energy. The enthalpy change of reaction can also be calculated using bond energy. Enthalpy change of reaction can also be calculated using bond enthalpy. So enthalpy change of reaction is given by bond energies of reactants. Is given by, you can say, bond energies of reactants minus, it can be written as bond energy of products. So actually enthalpy of reaction, the basic formula of enthalpy of reaction is given as, so delta H of reaction is equal to enthalpy of products minus, it is enthalpy of reactants we have. So in terms of enthalpies, it is enthalpy of products minus reactants. In terms of bond energies, it is bond energies of reactants minus bond energies of products. Then meaning of spontaneous process. Meaning of spontaneous process. A process which takes place on its own or after proper initiation is called a spontaneous process. A process which takes place on its own or after proper initiation is called spontaneous process. Now when you take radioactivity, this process doesn't require any initiation. It automatically takes place. It's also a spontaneous process. When you take burning of LPG gas means butane gas. So LPG gas plus oxygen burning. Now this one burning needs a matchstick. It needs a matchstick. It needs a matchstick now. So means it requires initiation. Once it starts burning, it continues burning. Once it starts burning, it continues burning now. Means here LPG gas requires initiation. Here radioactive doesn't require initiation, but once it starts, both of them move continuously. So spontaneous process takes place on its own or after proper initiation. That is said to be a spontaneous process. Now, when it comes to non spontaneous process, a process which does not take place by itself under a given set of conditions, does not take place by itself under a given set of conditions is called non spontaneous process. Let us take, for example, electrolysis of water. It takes place as long as power is supplied. It takes place as long as power is supplied. So when you electrolyze water, H2O, it gives H2 plus half O2. We are passing here current. So the process takes place as long as current is supplied. As long as current is supplied. When we stop the current, the reaction stops. The electrolysis stops here. Means the process takes place as long as driving force exists. When we withdraw the driving force, say for example current in this case, the process will not take place. So a process which requires a continuous driving force is said to be non-spontaneous process. Which requires a continuous driving force is called non-spontaneous process. Then comes meaning of entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder of a system, or you can say randomness of a system. It's a measure of disorder or randomness of a system. The change in entropy during a process is given by, that is delta S is given by Q by T. Delta S is given by Q by T. Where Q reversible is a quantity of heat absorbed reversibly at a temperature T Kelvin. Absorbed reversibly at a temperature of T Kelvin we have. And units will be Q by T, so for units are so many joule per Kelvin. The change in entropy depends only on initial and final states. The change depends on initial and final states, and therefore entropy is also a state function. It depends only upon initial and final states, hence entropy is also a state function. Now in liquid, solid and vapor state, if you compare three states, we have more randomness in vapor phase. Therefore vapor state has higher entropy when compared to liquid or else solid state. Vapor phase has a greater extent of disorderness. Therefore vapor is having highest entropy. Now the greater the number of chemical bonds, suppose in the case of all three of them are gaseous states only. In such a case, we need to take the number of bonds. Suppose if you see acetylene gas, acetylene is having, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bonds are there. Ethane, if you consider, we have in ethane molecule, there are 7 bonds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 here plus middle one 7. 7 bonds are there in the case of ethane molecule. Here we have 3 plus 2, 5 bonds are there now. So therefore more the number of bonds. If all of them are gaseous state, then see the number of bonds which are present. More the number of bonds is said to have higher the entropy. Then the spontaneity of a process. Now enthalpy factor alone cannot explain the spontaneity. Enthalpy factor cannot alone explain the spontaneity. Therefore, second law introduced the concept of entropy. Therefore, second law introduced the concept of entropy. It says the direction of a spontaneous process is the direction in which total entropy increases. Second law says the direction of a spontaneous process is the direction in which total entropy. Total entropy means it should be entropy of system plus surroundings. Total value should increase. So for a spontaneous process here, entropy of universe increases. For a spontaneous process is accompanied by increase in the total entropy, means total entropy of system and surroundings. In other words, entropy of universe continuously increasing because of the processes which are taking place. So second law says the direction of a spontaneous process is the direction in which total entropy increases. Total entropy means system plus surroundings entropy. So delta S of universe is given by delta S of system plus delta S of surroundings. So if delta S of system universe is positive, then it is said to be a spontaneous process. If delta S of universe is said to be negative, said to be non-spontaneous process. And if it's zero, it is said to be an equilibrium state. So depends upon the delta S of universe. Delta S of universe, positive, spontaneous process, negative, non-spontaneous, and zero value, it is said to be an equilibrium state. The entropy of a substance at 25 degrees Celsius and 1 atmospheric pressure is called standard entropy and is excuse me, and is denoted by S naught value. The entropy of a substance at 25 degrees Celsius and 1 atmosphere pressure is called standard entropy denoted by S naught. And standard entropy of elements is not zero. Standard enthalpy of elements is zero. Standard entropy of elements is not zero. Then Gibbs energy. Then comes Gibbs energy or Gibbs free energy. It is the available energy with which system can do useful work. It is available energy with which system can do useful work is called Gibbs energy. It is given by Gibbs energy. H is given by G is given by H minus Ts, where T into S is non-available energy. So finally energy available is equal to H minus Ts is available energy, which is called Gibbs energy, with which we can do useful work. Now Gibbs-Helmholtz equation, that is delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. So for a spontaneous process, delta G will be negative. For a non-spontaneous process, delta G remains positive. At an equilibrium state, delta G is equal to 0. So the spontaneity can be understood from delta G values. Delta G negative, spontaneous, delta G positive, non-spontaneous, delta G 0 is going to be an equilibrium state. The free energy change for a process at 298 Kelvin and 1 atmosphere pressure, in which all reactants and products are in their standard state, is called standard free energy change and is denoted by delta G naught. The free energy change for a process at 298 Kelvin and 1 atmosphere, in which all reactants and products are in standard states is called standard free energy change and is denoted by delta G naught. The standard free energy of the formation of elements is 0. The standard free energy of the formation of elements is 0. The standard free energy of the formation of H plus is also 0. Means it will be like this. Standard free energy change. So delta G naught of say H3O plus hydronium ion formation is equal to 0. Delta G naught standard free energy change of H2 of all elements is taken as 0. So the standard enthalpy of formation of the elements and standard free energy of the formation of the elements is taken as 0. Then Gibbs equation, predicting the feasibility of reaction using Gibbs equation. Using Gibbs equation, predicting the feasibility of reaction, that is delta G is given by delta H minus T delta S. So delta G must be negative for a process to be spontaneous. So if you take delta H less than 0, means delta H value negative, this value is negative value, and delta S greater than 0, so delta S is a positive value here. If delta H is negative and delta S is equal to positive, the overall value is always negative value. So such a process is always spontaneous at all the temperatures. So whatever may be the temperature, such process is going to be always spontaneous because delta G is always negative there. Now when you take delta H less than 0 and delta S less than 0, means in this reaction here, that is to say delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. So here delta H less than 0 means delta H is negative, this value is negative. Delta S less than 0, this value is also negative value we have. If both are negative value here, T delta S becomes a positive value. So therefore, T delta S value must be small. That implies temperature must be small. If temperature is very low, then the entire process is going to be negative because delta G value will become negative. Means delta H outweighs T delta S value if T is very much less. That is going to be spontaneous. If delta H is more than 0, delta S more than 0 means here delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. Both are positive values. So this is positive value. It's also a positive value. Means T delta S will be negative value. So if T delta S outweighs delta H, that is going to be spontaneous. Implies that temperature must be high. When T is high here, T delta S outweighs delta H value. There it is going to be spontaneous. If delta H is greater than 0, means if delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. So delta H more than 0, this value is a positive value. Delta S less than 0, so this value is negative value. Such a case, the overall delta G value will be always positive value, and therefore such a reaction is always non-spontaneous reaction. So the feasibility of reaction depends upon delta G, and then delta G depends upon delta G. In turn depends upon delta H and then delta S values. Then Van 't Hoff's equation, Van 't Hoff's reaction isotherm. Van 't Hoff's reaction isotherm is given by delta G is equal to delta G naught plus RT ln Q. RT ln Q. Q is called reaction quotient. It's a natural logarithm, so ln Q. If we are changing into the base 10, the equation becomes delta G plus 2.303 RT log Q. If we take an equilibrium state here, delta G will be 0. At equilibrium state, delta G will remain 0 there now. So when delta G is equal to 0, and then Q becomes equal to K. So if Q is equal to K or Kp, and then delta G becomes 0, that is to say we are at equilibrium state. So then what happens is delta G naught becomes equal to minus 2.303 RT log Kp. RT log Kp. This formula can be used to find out the equilibrium constant provided standard delta G naught value is given to us. The relationship between the standard free energy change and equilibrium constant is given by delta G naught. Delta G naught is equal to minus 2.303 RT log Kp. From this we can say if Kp is less than 0, delta G naught is if Kp is less than 1, Kp is less than 1, delta G naught is more than 0. And if Kp is more than 1, delta G naught becomes less than 0. This can be observed, this can be known by observing the equation itself. If Kp is equal to 1, then delta G naught will be equal to 0. So relation between the Kp and delta G naught can be known by observing the relation itself. Then comes the standard free energy change. Relation between the standard free energy change and standard cell potential. The formula is given by delta G naught is equal to minus NF E naught, where E naught is a standard EMF of the cell.